Well, we'll go ahead and get this meeting started. Looks like it's about 6:34 or so by the clock on the wall. Call this meeting to order and ask that the roll be called, please.
Present. Present.
Present.
Present. We do have a quorum. Thank you. Move on then to approval of agenda and addenda. Moved by Ms. Petrie.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Goss. Any additions or corrections? Items to be removed? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. That passes. Thank you. Move on then to item 4, approval of the minutes from the ELEC committee meeting of May 4th, 2017. Moved by Ms. Petrie, seconded by Mr. King. Any corrections to those or additions? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes. There is no public for public participation. Then move on to communications. Anybody have any communications?
Yeah, I'm having some problems.
Patsy's having issues at her being rebuilt home, but she'll get through them. Move on then to our first really action items. We have 7, line item 7 for information only. We have the legislative update on Senate Bill 611, the Muhammad Aquifer Protection. I'll just read all these off and let Susan update us. Is it Susan? You get updates, yeah. Unless there's any objections. We have Senate Bill 611 on the Muhammad Aquifer Protection, Senate Bill 1561, pollution control for the counties, and Senate Bill 1417, electronic products recycling. And Susan?
Thanks. I asked to have these on the agenda because I was getting some calls about these and figured you might be getting some calls as well. So it's good to be aware. These are pending governor's signatures, pending bills for governor's signature. The first one related directly to the Muhammad Aquifer Advocacy Alliance topics discussed at their meeting. So I included it there, and you may be aware that this is a task force proposed to work during the fiscal year 2018 and provide a recommendation to the governor with regard to continued monitoring and protection of the Muhammad Aquifer. And so that's pending a signature. The next one.
Yeah, if you go ahead.
You're
Patsy.
going to talk about your meeting in Bloomington. Okay, I'll just save all of my questions for then. Thanks.
Okay. The next one was the object of questions only because it was so quick and everybody was wondering why it was being proposed. Thanks. Test. Yeah. Senate Bill 1561, people were asking about, 1 or 2 people, not that many, but it was a confusion statewide at first because county solid waste management and recycling persons were thinking this was intended to restrict somehow their ability to receive funding from tipping fees or some other kind of thing. So it was clarified in an amendment, and then I received a question about, does it impact local government ability to monitor or enforce anything related to the consent decree? So I asked our Assistant State's Attorney's Office to look at this, and the Assistant State's Attorney Jacob Krogert looked at it and gave us a response, and he essentially said there is no problem as this bill, which seeks to limit county authority as far as the Solid Waste Management Planning Act to impact counties' rights to enforce the consent decree. And he noted that the consent decree only has one specific limitation on counties, and that is that the counties agree that if presented with an application for the siting and development of a transfer station and recycling center by CLI or any of its affiliates, the counties will consider it in good faith, whether same is consistent with the solid waste management plan. So no impact of this legislation, Senate Bill 1561, on consent decree monitoring and enforcement and all that, as far as counties are going.
Patsy has a question. Go ahead,
Just
Patsy.
a clarification question. Are we the only county that was confused about it? And if so, then my question will be moot. If it seems to be across the board, are they going to try to clean up the wording if and when it gets passed?
Yeah, when it was initially proposed in March, there was kinds of concern. Newspapers wrote articles about this proposed legislation, and since then, an amendment has been made to the Senate bill to clarify its intent a bit more. Finally, Senate Bill 1417 also has passed both houses and awaits signature. It's an overhaul of the electronics take-back program in the state. And over the next year, there are limited changes that would be implemented. The weight objective is continued on through 2018, but the convenience standards kick in beginning in 2019. And if the county opts in to this revised program, then the county will receive benefits such as the manufacturers will finance the collection and transport of electronics that are collected. Still, the local governments would be responsible for operations of any kind of site or operations of any kind of one-day collection event. So it's an improvement. It's lower in cost, I would imagine. It will reduce the cost to have these collections. And so we're waiting to see. There are some final changes that are expected to be negotiated over the summer and again voted on during the veto session. So everybody's hoping this will get passed.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Susan. Yeah, feel free to,
Yeah,
Go ahead, Patsy.
So I'm understanding, you mentioned previously on 1417 that you thought that would end up being a saving for counties, even though counties still have some responsibilities with the way it's written now, right? Do I understand?
It does represent reduced costs to local governments.
Okay, what about the pollution control?
Is that the previous Senate bill?
1561,
Okay.
sorry.
As everybody, not everyone, but people that I have talked to think that this doesn't have any impact on counties, essentially. It's just stating the obvious, that counties cannot control
okay.
business.
Okay, all right. And you wouldn't know about the Muhammad Aquifer protection, because that's not even signed and sealed, started. Okay, thanks.
yeah, feel free to, if you have questions on any of those three, since we kind of did them together. So if there's any other discussion, questions on those, or if you have anything else, Mr. King?
My question would just be in the electronics or SB 1417, was there any expansion of what would be included in that, or is it pretty much your same things that we were collecting local or in this area?
Microphone.
No materials added to the electronics that are banned from landfills, but it's essentially restructuring the whole collection program so that it can be sustained cost-wise from various sources other than local governments.
Okay.
Go ahead, Patsy.
Well, building on what Robert asked about, actually, because you mentioned weight, and I'm assuming you meant WEIGHT. So does that mean that they will expand the size of the televisions that they are willing to accept? Because that was a bit of a sticky wicket previously.
Okay, never that I recall has size been a problem. It's the cathode ray tube aspect, the leaded glass component of the cathode ray tube that has been the cause of the increased dysfunction of this statewide collection program, only because of the processing costs to separate the lead from the glass, sending it to a special processing facility. And, right.
Further discussion on any one of these three Senate bills? Seeing none, we'll move on then to B. Hello, Mr. Patterson. We have the update regarding the land resource management conditions relevant to the Champaign County Land Resource Management Plan. And Susan?
Thank you. This is an annual update with regard to significant conditions or events that have happened that relate to land use management and resources in the county. So the regional water supply framework you've probably heard about was approved by the RPC board last October, and it sets out in 4 categories, 36 separate strategies to choose from for any kind of entity in East Central Illinois that is interested in working on ways to improve the water quality and quantity of essentially the Mahomet Aquifer source. Also relates to groundwater. The report itself is a water quality kind of report, strategies for improving that and protecting that in our area. It's a region kind of plan. So I shouldn't call it a plan, it's a framework with strategies. So that's a good thing to be aware of. And it is referenced, it was referenced at the Mahomet Aquifer Advocacy Alliance meeting. So it's considered as a progressive kind of a framework to refer to. Also, I mentioned the Mahomet Aquifer Advocacy Alliance, which is the new reincarnation of the Mahomet Aquifer Coalition, with a better name possibly, and with new people feeding into it, and they have an executive committee structure I can talk about in the next agenda item, and they welcome input and participation. I mentioned also the Champaign County Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Systems Stormwater Map, the MS4 program, efforts to create a stormwater map of the Champaign County MS4 jurisdictional areas, which comprise approximately 11 square miles in the county. And we're halfway through development of that. We being staff of the Planning and Zoning Department and Regional Planning Commission. Also, I mentioned the Champaign County MS4 Environmental Justice Map, another effort completed this year which mapped out specific areas of the Champaign County MS4 jurisdiction based on various factors such as race, income, and income and race essentially are the 2 major factors that were considered. And that map will be updated annually based on the U.S. Census data that was used to create it. There's a copy of the outline of the MS4 jurisdiction on the next page, which is, there's better online digital versions of that to refer to. Phase 1 of the Kickapoo Rail Trail is about to open this summer, so that's included here because I thought by now it might have been open, but still not yet open. That's a 6-mile approximately length of trail, multi-purpose trail between Urbana and St. Joe. I should mention too here in this report, which I have, the local recycling event coordinations that have gone on. A local government tire collection occurred, and there's interest in having one of those every year. That has been expressed. The residential electronics collections you've heard about. Our last event this May, our most recent event this May was successful, given 2+ hours of torrential rain. We had all kinds of protocol that we hadn't used before, like when to call in 100 community service workers from being poured on. Sort of an event to get through. Everybody was happy when the sun finally did come out. 1,100 participants approximately, and all 7 semi-trailers were filled. So all expectations were met. And we saved money by partnering with Will County, which everyone's pretty happy about local government-wise. That's it for that report this year.
Thank you, Susan. Mr. Goss?
A question about the Kickapoo Rail Trail. I noticed that the trail itself does not have stop signs, or didn't. I was by there last week for the bicycle traffic. Do they intend to put those in, do you know?
John may know because
Yeah,
He has
there
special
is
use
extensive
space.
signage at each road intersection that we will be inspecting for. Signage for the trail users, signage for the highway users, and even signage for the township road user. So with each group of users being, aware of that crossing, hopefully folks will be reasonable.
Well, I'm just concerned in the spring and fall, the traffic that those roads get right in there, that especially in the fall down when you get near the grain elevator, that there's going to be a severe, I could see some serious accidents happening there if we don't have signage.
At the ZBA hearing, there was more, there was actually more concern just about everyday traffic because cars go so much faster than grain trucks. And once they initiate the turning maneuver, they don't really have
Yeah.
a lot of flexibility. They're going to turn. And if the bicyclist doesn't stop like he's told to, that's going to be bad. The Forest Preserve District is aware that they're going to have to stay on top of that. And they said they would. But they've worked with IDOT. There's signs on each leg of those intersections for each type of user. So, hopefully that will all work out. But that aspect of it is a work in progress.
So it won't be under our jurisdiction necessarily. Good.
And just to follow up on that, it was explained, I know when the Forest Reserve Director came and spoke to us, the vehicular traffic will have the right of way. Being a trail like that, they're the ones that are supposed to be expected to stop. So, Ms. Petrie?
Well, back to my concern about the rural roads and line of sight. Are those line of sights clear for a good distance?
Those line of sights will be much improved once all of the invasive vegetation has been removed.
Okay.
And the Forest Preserve District is clear that, don't plant tall plants in the visibility triangle, and they're aware of that.
Okay. Because it does bother me. Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Petrie.
I have a couple of continuing aspects that I've mentioned before. First of all, it's nice to see these maps started. I'm assuming if I looked at them digitally, I could overlay them. Is that correct? They're in scale?
if you access these digitally, you could zoom in and move around.
But I can't
map.
overlay them.
I'm not sure. I think there will be layers, yes. There's several layers that are on the map, so yes, I would imagine you can turn them off and on.
Okay. I'll get to that as soon as I
Sure.
figure out the sinks, right? The second is, the more and more I read about stormwater management in the county, and I look at this map and our areas of responsibility, it continues to really drive me nuts in that sometime down the line, it would be really great to get a good integrated GIS mapping so that we see the whole total picture, whether it's our jurisdiction or not. I mean, for me to look at these little sections and look at the ditches and things, that doesn't tell the whole story of the stormwater, and to continue the segmentation that is presently in existence, I don't think it serves us well. I know you're working toward that. I'm just reinforcing forward movement and getting this into a collaborative visual expression.
I've so noted that, and one of the purposes of that map is to be able to trace illicit discharges and where they're coming from and direct it heading to. So,
Understand that, but there can be illicit discharges that come from other sources and us, and so to get
Yeah.
the whole picture together, yeah.
good point.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on then to C. We have the fiscal year 2017 county planning contract status update. Susan again.
This is an update with regard to how far along we are with the work plan for fiscal year 17 for the county planning contract. And bottom line is, we're about 44% of the way through. There's some overlap with the LRMP implementation item relative that relates to and with regard to environmental justice implementation and the MS4 item that you see. So we need to maybe make these a little more clear, but all tasks are represented here percentage-wise and relative to the totals of the contract. Nothing remarkable to say about this. It's simply a snapshot of where we are.
Yep. Ms. Petrie.
Yeah, okay, you say you're about 44% through. Well, if I look at the money allocated and what's been spent so far, it's only about a third. So are you telling us that some of the projects were lower cost projects that you've been able to move forward on?
You're saying that 31 or 32,000 is about a third of 73?
Well, I'm looking at page 9.
Okay. Okay, yes, that, you're looking at a part of the total.
Oh, okay.
It's like
Sorry.
a subset.
I was looking at this other matrix that you have over here.
Yeah, that's easy to confuse. You're looking at like a zoomed-in section of the first line item, LRMP implementation. Sorry for the confusion.
So that's still, okay. All right.
Any further discussion on this?
Okay. Yeah, I
Go ahead,
have-
Patsy.
I have a couple of things. I'll read it to you. This is from a constituent. Looking at 17-1, that's page 10. And I'll just read it so it goes into the record. Says a dozen areas or so of the LRMP need fundraising research, but there are no staff resources to do the searching. So bottom line is, those things don't appear to have a chance of getting done. It's good to have it on the record, for one. For two, we're going into budget time, so it's something to be thinking about. We have this in the tasks, yet it's sort of like the state. We have tasks, but they're not funded, so it makes it hard to get that accomplished. And then the second one I want to read in. Oh, great, I've lost it, just a minute. Okay, the second one that I want to read into the record has to do with 17-2. And the individual writes, under the significance, quote, heading, new trends in development which could impact rural areas. And the person is pointing out, how about equal billing for new trends and preservation? and that is not included in this.
So that's that topic of preservation, is it? Land preservation?
It is
So
the
it has-
LRMP.
Yeah, there are 10 topic areas in the LRMP, but sometimes I'm not aware of any kind of advances in each of those topics over the course of 1 year. You know what I mean? Like for transportation, the rail trail was something that's happening this year. But for preservation of land, we have existing policies that we try to and continue to enforce as possible. But are you aware of additional, maybe I could report on the amount of land annexed into municipalities, if that's an interesting.
I think that might be good because to aggregate that information. So I realize as we look at that, especially in this report, it's very small amount.
Okay.
But over time, it becomes an aggregated number, and I think this particular individual maintains a strong concern about creeping incrementalism into the ag land. Shall we phrase it that way? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else? Seeing nothing, we'll then move on to D, the Muhammad Aquifer Advocacy Alliance Annual Summit. Susan?
Thank you. I had the opportunity to attend this meeting in Normal on Thursday last week, and it was well attended, and they had 75 to 80 people, most of them invited persons from the 15-county area, and including municipalities in that area. I think many of them were from Champaign County area. The majority. Yeah. So it was an interesting meeting. Steve Carter and Joe Hooker, both retired from the city of Champaign, made the initial presentation about the origins of this consent decree, essentially, and why this organization was formed. That was followed by presentation about the restructured Muhammad Aquifer Advocacy Alliance. And essentially, I have 3 PowerPoints that were used, which I'd like to share with each of you via email, if you don't mind, or post them somewhere, because they're pretty interesting and contain a lot of information that I'm probably not going to talk about right now. For example, there's 3 priorities for this new group: monitoring and research, legislative advocacy, and public education and engagement. So all 3 areas will be a focus of this restructured group. And there's ways to be involved. There's an at-large position that any interested local government could write to the facilitator of this group and become involved for no fee. And there's opportunities to be on the executive committee and pay a fee of approximately $8,000 or $7,000. I don't have that figure in front of me. I think there's one position on the executive committee that is a non-paying kind of position. So, yeah, they invite participation. There's lots of interest that was expressed in protecting our drinking water. That point was made over and over throughout the meeting. The annual budget for this group is $35,000, with $15,000 of that devoted to a lobbyist or a lobby group for legislative advocacy, $16,000 devoted to hiring of a professional engineer to do landfill water quality monitoring, $3,000 to public education, and $1,000 for contingency. So the landfill monitoring person who was hired this year gave a presentation about his duties. And his duties, I'll stop shuffling paper as soon as I get to his page, sorry, include monitoring the Illinois EPA applications that occur over the Mahomet Aquifer area, especially around the Clinton landfill, and beginning to understand data necessary to understand to conduct the monitoring. So he's going to keep us apprised on a regular basis, and I'd be happy to provide an information item and update you as we receive information from this engineer. I'm going to stop talking about it now. I will share these 3 PowerPoint handouts that were done. And there was one graphic I should have brought to show you. It was an interesting graphic about relative quantity of groundwater to the Earth's surface. I thought it was amazing, so I'll share that with you.
Thank you, Susan. John, did you have?
Susan, did you mentioned that the regional water supply framework was the focus of some discussion at that
Yes.
meeting?
In the open discussion part of the summit, Steve Carter brought up this framework and praised it and said it's an example of how to move ahead, working with each other and in an organized kind of fashion.
Were folks invited to request an electronic copy of that if they wanted, or?
That's a good point. I think one good thing to do would be to notify the facilitator of this, which has a website, by the way, which I think I mentioned. But I will share that with this facilitator and make sure he has a link to it.
Thank you, John. Further discussion on this? Ms. Petrie?
I have a couple of aspects to put in the record. First of all, is it the way people become involved in this is each county is putting forth people from their county to be involved in this newly formed group? Is that the manner?
So your question is with regard to a civilian or a layperson, could they be involved in this group? I think this group is pretty open and inviting the participation of anybody, is the impression I get.
Okay, but from what you explained to us, to be on the executive
there
committee, there is a monetary
Right.
aspect
and
connected
that's
with
pretty
it.
typical. I mean, maybe that's not a typical structure for funding, but it's typical to limit participation in the executive committee level in
Okay.
any kind of group, usually.
All right, so are you planning to bring to finance at COW at some point in time about whether the county is going to be asked to do a contribution so that this county has a place at the table?
Now, this county does have an opportunity to input at any time. Does this county want to be on the executive committee is the question, the underlying question you're asking.
So you do not, I'm trying to understand the structure here. So you do not have to be at the executive committee to have a serious chance of input?
I contact the facilitator of this group pretty regularly if I have a question or if I see some legislation that I want them to know about, because they have a lobbyist who can operate on behalf of this group. For example, the Senate Bill 1561 questions about, does this impact enforcement or any kind of monitoring that would occur in conjunction with the consent decree? We asked our state's attorney's office to look at that, whereby now that we know about the legislative advocacy component of this, we could ask them to look at it. You know what I mean? And they welcome any kind of participation or input that anybody might have.
Well, I'm looking for efficiency and effectiveness of participation with my questions. The purpose of the lobbyist, if these bills are going through and have a high percentage chance of being signed, then what will the lobbyist's role be for that amount of money?
It's all hypothetical at this point.
It's
Whatever we're talking
50% of the
about.
budget.
Right. They would probably, I would guess, this executive committee would launch a campaign for increased funding, as they did back during the times when the consent decree was in play, or development of that was occurring. So this is an ongoing kind of annual budget for a lobbyist, but I'm not aware of any issue before the lobbyist at present.
Okay, then taking it to the next stage, at one point in time, I thought part of the state level legislation was that the focus was not just on the Muhammad Aquifer. I thought the focus was on all aquifers throughout the state. Did that get lost in translation?
Well, I can check on that as far as which piece of legislation we're talking about and.
Well,
the focus
aquifer
of this-
protection. I mean,
Yeah.
this is designated to the Muhammad Aquifer, which is great. That's fine. But I thought the point had come, if I'm remembering correctly, that there's a realization that we have other aquifers in the state, especially in the northern part of the state, that are also in jeopardy, and that it was going to become broader based in the legislation. And maybe it got narrowed down to Muhammad, but what I'm then asking is, did the other concept get lost?
I think you're correct. The other concepts may not be a focus of this group. This mission statement indicates the Alliance is committed to issue advocacy, which may be broad, possibly, and the preserving of the Muhammad Aquifer as a reliable and safe resource of fresh water for our region. So to the degree that issue advocacy is broad, perhaps then they would have a wider focus.
Okay, well, if you go to those meetings, I would hope that you would encourage that and not just, it's taken a lot of time for us to get where we're at with the Muhammad Aquifer. This has been years, and since things seem to be rolling along, it would be nice to broaden our foundational base for leveraging, especially if 50% of the proposed budget is for lobbying. I can't see 50% lobbying on the Muhammad Aquifer at this point because a lot has been done, and some of it really isn't totally protecting the aquifer unless they're going to move forward with some other bills that will really actually protect the aquifer.
Well, you've given me something to talk to the facilitator about
Okay.
at my next phone call with.
Okay, and how often is this group going to be meeting? Is this quarterly, every other month? Can you help me with that framework?
That detail is escaping me as far as the executive committee meeting schedule, but I can find out for you and let you know.
Okay, just so we understand, since
Yeah.
you said there was a critical mass of people from Champaign there.
At the annual summit.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think so. I think, well, Macon County was represented, and
Okay,
McLean County certainly was, as the location of the meeting.
right.
So, yeah, and some people I didn't recognize, but mostly Champaign County and Macon County.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. King?
My question is about the attendance as well. I was just going to ask, would you sort of look at the Muhammad Aquifer Advocacy Alliance group as being a fairly diverse group, or is that an area that could be expanded as we begin to share more information about the aquifer?
Well, I think this group is making efforts to be transparent, but my perception is that there's some limitations possibly in who they invited to attend this meeting, and why couldn't it be a broader, more open, larger venue for a summit kind of thing? Maybe this was an introductory kind of meeting, but yeah, that's a good question.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on then to E, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, IEPA notices. If there's no objection, I'll just go ahead and read all four of them into the record, and then we can discuss any one of the four, since they're all kind of the same. So we have one, We have the IEPA construction permit and lifetime operating permit for Altamont Company veneer production facility located at 116 East Neal Drive in Rantoul. Item 2, IEPA construction permit and operating permit revision for Illinois NICAST LLC, doing business as Alloy Engineering and Casting Company, located at 1700 West Washington Street in Champaign. 3, we have the IEPA public notice of proposed renewal of the Clean Air Act permit program permit for Flexingate Corporation facilities located at 601 Guardian Drive and at 1306 East University Avenue, both in Urbana. And then 4, IEPA notice of application for permit to manage waste at former Champaign Municipal Landfill located at 3616 West Bloomington Road, US Route 150, Champaign. Is there discussion on this, or John, do you want to make any comments at this point in time? Seeing no questions, those are obviously just notices. We'll move on then to item 8. We have the items to receive and place on file by ELUC to allow for a 60-day review period. We have A, the proposed fiscal year 2018 Champaign County contract with the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission. And Susan?
Thank you. Thank you. We spent a few extra days putting this together more carefully, and apologize for the delay in getting it to you with the packet. What we have here is a request for a renewal of our annual contract with the county for planning technical services. And the point is made that in recent years, the contract amount has remained static, and those figures are provided. And no change in the county planning contract amount over time, plus the modest increase in RPC staff costs, have resulted in fewer RPC staff hours available overall. So, and these factors limit progress towards developing items for county review and potential implementation of the LRMP priority items as they were prioritized by the county board in the LRMP adopted in 2010. So the mid-course summary that was distributed last fall detailed that situation, and that point is made for your information. The one plan development that is behind schedule is the solid waste management plan update, and that is not included in this fiscal year 2018 proposal, and I just wanted to make you aware of that. Back in 2015, we distributed a memorandum that described the reasons why updating that solid waste management plan was important, and it is a very old plan, and there's many reasons to update it. I'd be happy to go over that at some time, perhaps if this is reconsidered this year, but given this proposed work plan, MS4 items, again, have the majority of hours devoted to them. We're making good progress, and perhaps if this is the proposal that is adopted, and these items that we propose to do are completed during fiscal year 2018, then certainly, not certain, nothing is certain, I realize, but possibly in the next fiscal year we could feature the updated solid waste management plan as one option, because that plan would take about 300 hours of time to update. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's take a look at this. If you have any questions, as we have in the past, we provide an overview of items in the plan with the same amount as the budget from last year as the total resource available. And we give you an update about, we proposed to do the routine LRMP implementation items, which are detailed on the next page, 4 of 7, on page 4. And the one difference to this plan is that keeping ELUC informed of the Muhammad Aquifer Alliance activities has been added as a monitoring kind of thing to do. So back to the overall general plan proposal. Like ours are proposed for these same categories of tasks, the Champaign County MS4 Stormwater Management Program implementation now includes completing Phase 2 of storm sewer system map for the MS4 jurisdiction in the county, and expanding that to complete a drainage system map for county highways outside of the MS4 area in the county's jurisdiction. Amending the Champaign County nuisance ordinance with provisions that address illicit discharges, and developing a Champaign County green infrastructure and green housekeeping webpage and sustainable lawn care webpage. Developing a Champaign County stormwater pollution prevention plan. And similar types of hours devoted to coordination of solid waste recycling events, Champaign County area rural transit system coordination, and administrative and non-staff expenses. Each of these LRMP tasks detailed on the next page contain a description. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Patsy.
Well, since I haven't had a chance to read it in the explanation, maybe in the following pages, but talk about development of a Champaign County green infrastructure and green housekeeping. What is the goal of that?
So this is a part of our annual goals in the NPDES MS4 program to fulfill the best management or best practices that are listed in that program. So it was something that has been previously mentioned here, maybe during May, at the May meeting, was it? John, I missed that meeting. Do you want to talk about it?
You know, one thing the MS4 program requires us to do is, even if we can't implement a regulatory program to, in fact, make sure things happen, we're still obligated to provide information. You may recall I talked about the DuPage County website and had a packet here of handouts. They have probably the most thorough website I've seen with handouts related to all aspects of what the EPA likes to call green housekeeping. Again, we can't make people do those things, but we can at least make information available.
Okay.
We are required to do that as part of the MS4 program. And one thing I'll take advantage of speaking right now to point out, on page 3 of 7, you see that the MS4 program takes up 435 of the 1,077 hours. And if you turn over to the LRMP implementation on page 4, you see that the MS4 program takes up an additional 150 hours. And you adding those two together means the MS4 program is now
A pig.
consuming more than 50% of your planning budget.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
And that's not because we're trying to have the best MS4 program in the world. We're just trying to meet the minimum requirements.
Thanks for the reminder and the explanation, and doggone, I thought maybe we were going to go for a growth boundary with the green infrastructure. Susan laughed.
Well, it's better than crying.
Further discussion on this at this point in time?
We do invite your input over the next 2-month period.
60 days, I hope.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
till August.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So, Go ahead, Mr. King.
I know that I guess the budget seems to remain the same, but it looks like the hours are off, and maybe I'm missing something. But I guess the page 3 of the general work plan, is that the bulk of the budget there, or?
That is an overall snapshot of the entire,
macro level.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So that the MS4 come down, it looks like it decreased 85 hours, for the upcoming budget, and then there's.
right. Now, hours, I almost wish the hours weren't included, because sometimes it's more than one person. Sometimes it represents different pay scales at different
Gotcha.
people.
Okay.
So it changes for that reason. We try to, if we're doing routine field data collection, we have the option of using an intern that's trained.
I see. Okay, that's good. And then my second one was, I guess, there was general planning services last year. Do you not anticipate using general planning services this year?
Well, there is no, essentially last year, the MS4 program supplanted that category, and it hasn't returned yet.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Anything else before we move on? Okay, we'll then move on to B, which is also for a 60-day review period. We have the proposed minor amendments to the Champaign County Land Resource Management Plan. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, and
Good.
sorry for the paper shuffling, but I again misplaced my packet, which is pretty terrible to do that. Here it is. I'm going to have to go digital. So 2 categories of minor amendments are proposed. One, to include information about the developing MS4 stormwater management program here in Champaign County. I noticed in the volume 1 of the LRMP that there's one paragraph about NPDES, but this seems like a logical thing to include a basic description of this program, since it is so much more developed than it was when the LRMP was first approved. Then, to also I believe that's it. And then to also include an updated version of the land use management area map to indicate annexations that have occurred and changing extraterritorial jurisdiction boundaries. I did, out of interest, calculate the total area of annexations over the past year, and that anticipated Patsy's question. 292 acres, mostly limited to Champaign boundaries, City of Urbana, Village of Rantoul, and Village of Savoy. There is one annexation that occurred in Philo, and one in Royal, and 2 in Fisher. I guess, and 1 in Tolono as well. Sorry to go on and on about this, but certainly 292 acres total is now. Didn't do that. That would require how many hours to do? A couple. I should be able to do that. I wish I could do that quickly. It might take me longer than it would take a GIS specialist, but yeah, that's.
Okay, but that is troubling, because once it gets into those new boundaries, then we know it's out of farmland life. So.
Well, the county does everything it can to implement best prime farmland preservation during zoning, rezoning cases and special use cases. I know that's brought.
292 acres?
That was all within the contiguous urban growth area, I'm assuming.
No, Royal and does not have an ETJ or a contiguous urban growth area. And Tolono, yeah, this was all within the contiguous urban growth area, except for the annexation that occurred in Royal.
So we do need a growth boundary.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we've got a new 9, which is the amendment, or addendum. Items to be approved by ELUC. We only have the one item, the recreation and entertainment license for live bands and DJs at Last Call for Alcohol, 108 Main Street, Penfield, for June 1st through December 31st, 2017. These were distributed at your place tonight. Is there such a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Patterson, seconded by Mr. Goss. Discussion on this? Patsy?
Yeah, I have a lot of discussion on this. How did the sheriff approve this? I mean, this place has been in trouble constantly when I was chair. And it had fines from here to the state. So what's going on? And I'd like to understand better what the shape of the business is now. The sheriff has approved it. I mean, I trust the sheriff, but how many times did I have the sheriff out there? A lot.
The only information we received was no objections.
From whom?
The sheriff.
Well, unless somebody can explain to me there's been some major change in that business and how it's run, I can't support this because we had no end of problems with this venue, and this is being given for 6 months, so I can't support it.
Go ahead. If you have something else, John.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm just wanted to point out, this is just the R&E license.
I understand.
The liquor license is a separate issue.
Yeah, but I understand.
For Mr. King?
So this place doesn't currently operate the way that it's being proposed? Is that what I'm on?
I don't know. They had an R&E license last year for only one event, and this year they're expanding it to be for the remainder of the year.
Further discussion? Sorry, Kyle. Mr. Passion, go ahead.
So what is the approval process for the sheriff's office? Our recommendation or whatever?
You know, I actually don't know what they take into account, but they're reviewing it for public safety concerns, and they apparently had no public safety concerns.
Further discussion? Okay, we had a first and a second for the motion on the floor to approve it. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
Nay.
With 5 of us here, I believe Mr. Patterson voted aye, Mr. Goss not, I voted aye, so 5 to, and Mr. King, Patsy voted against, but that passed. So, thank you, that.
So remember when the sheriff gets called out there.
Will we ever, I don't know if we'll ever hear if the sheriff gets called up there, unless it makes the news, maybe. We'll move on then to what would now be 10. We have the monthly reports. We have both the March 2017 and the April 2017. Is there any discussion or questions on those? Go ahead, Patsy.
Yeah, I need to, need some guidance on how to put together the acreage that has been annexed into, within the, the adjacent area. And that's a lot of acreage as compared to what I see monthly on the report of how many acres or how few acres of prime farmland are taken out. And maybe you can help me put these together, because over time, I've been very impressed with the minimal amount of farmland that's been taken out. Yet, I'm bollocks by the amount of acreage farmland acreage that has now been taken out. So
Well, here in the monthly report, we're reporting on
what you
best
guys
prime
are-
farmland conversion that results from county approvals.
And
And
this
what
is all
Susan
the-
reported on was best prime farmland that's consumed by municipal annexations.
Microphone.
My total was land, but not necessarily best prime farmland.
Further discussion on this, on these two reports? Yeah, go ahead, Patsy.
Yeah, I have a question. Has anybody done a projection with using the assumptions of what's been happening? You could do a model logarithmically to look at how these extended boundaries are growing, and when is it going to become a point in time that they're all going to be connected? So we're going to have this outer rim of connected boundaries, which, depending on how the boundaries grow, will leave a little bit of inner circle on the east side, probably not on the west side. That'll be county. Has anybody done this?
Whoops, excuse me. I'll respond.
Go ahead, Susan.
Kuatz has 5 different models that they use for transportation planning. And one of those models probably has the capacity to do this kind of a projection.
Well, I think it really is important for us to, not tomorrow or yesterday, to start looking at that aspect and development because of the way things lay out in our county. And if I started growing these boundaries out, especially in the southern ring, it's not going to be long. And then we'll have this little area here, running around here, that's county. And it's going to think about that in conjunction with the MS4 and some of those issues. So it might be time to do a projection, to look at what potentially is going to be happening with land use and where the county controls come into play. And this may move us forward even faster on seeing where collaborations and some IGAs can be put into place for us all working together because, unfortunately, that's how our county's laid out. And so we're not going to change that part, but we can start planning ahead because I can see within 5 years that southern ring touching.
It's an interesting question in my view.
Anything else? We'll move on then and replace those on file. We'll move on then to the other business. We have the July 6, 2017 ELEC meeting, which it's been normal practice that we cancel the standing and actually usually the cow, but that hasn't been decided yet for the July, and we just take care of everything right at the regular board meeting. I assume, John, you don't foresee, as usual, anything coming up that would... Well, you had the one issue that you were mentioning to me, but we can still probably take care of it if you want to discuss it.
Yeah, I mean, the state's attorney is getting close to needing to send out requests for, quotations on some demolition. And given the overall budget condition, we're kind of wondering if we're still moving ahead on that. But we could bring that directly to the board in July if the committee, I mean, I've got no guarantee that would be ready for the July ELUC meeting date. I've got no guarantee that would be ready for the July county board meeting date. It might work perfectly well for the August.
Okay, thanks, John. So I mean, I guess it's kind of at our, as an ELEC committee, our will as a group as to whether or not we have a meeting, but it doesn't look like we're there's maybe one issue that John foresees. I don't know personally if that would be enough to go ahead and have a meeting. Of course, the idea being it's middle of summer, let people have a little bit of a break and do your, do your summer activities and maybe a little bit of a break before the budget stuff really gets going. So is there, just kind of by consensus, I guess, just go ahead and,
Well, if push comes to shove and John really needs us, we can always call a meeting, but you're not anticipating that, and you said to me it isn't an imminent issue. Okay.
yeah, so sounds like by consensus, we'll go ahead and not have a July ELEC meeting. Just anything that we need to take care of, we'll take care of at the full county board. Thanks. We'll move on then to chair's report. I have nothing at this point in time, and designation of items for the consent agenda, there's nothing, because they were either placed on review or the recreation license was approved straight by us. So if there's no objection, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Moved by Mr. Patterson, seconded by Mr. King. We're adjourned. Thanks.